All right, I'm Justin Franson. Thanks for joining us on our Urban Freedom Summit. Today, I have probably personally one of my most favorite guests I've ever been able to get a chance to sit down with. One of the most versatile human beings on the planet, period. I cannot say enough about him. Yes, there are some incredible doctors in our panels. Yes, there are facilitators. Very few as diverse as David Weinberg, one of my good friends. He's a sensei. We call him a Shihan, right?
Correct.
As well, which is a higher level than a sensei. He's like a master teacher of Ketsugo, Peter Friedman's Ketsugo method. And he is just a wizard at so many different things. He's amazing with financial planning as an attorney, and obviously dives heavily into crypto as well. Concert pianist, professional salsa dancer, one of the baddest guys on the planet. But he has produced an album for his on his pianist, and you can purchase it on iTunes as well. But what we're going to talk about today is his site, Combat Science. And you guys, he has a system of martial arts that will help you be free. And you can learn this just at home remotely. You don't even have to go and have him one-on-one. You're not going to get your butt kicked. Jiu-jitsu, because this is combat. This is for keeps. This is combat jiu-jitsu. It's all done to develop coordination and train the nervous system in a slow way. So I've absolutely been blown away by it, and blown away by David. So let's dive into this topic for urban freedom. I mean, in order to be free, for me, I feel you have to be able to have some survival instincts just that are innate in your body, and then be able to act on them. So if there's a threat, you gotta protect yourself. I mean, to me, that's like being the most free, because then you can walk around, you're confident. You know, like a lion walks around the jungle, they're as confident as it gets. They're as free as it gets. You can't mess with those guys. And so that's the energy that we want to introduce to you guys and share, that, hey, anyone can learn this system at home, and Sensei will teach you how to get there. So, Dave, thanks so much for jumping on with us.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for the kind introduction.
No, my pleasure. It's even as much as I gave you, it's very understated. So I wanted to ask you, what's your first thoughts of when that come to your mind when you think about urban freedom?
I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, there's a lot of things that could be included in that topic, but until you get at least to that fundamental base level of being able to physically protect yourself, protect your family from harm, protect your loved ones, protect, assets and physical possessions and treasures that you've potentially worked your life for. If you can't protect that, then you kind of don't really have anything, right? Because it can be taken from you so easily. So I think that's something that a lot of people might look at, self-defense, and kind of however form it takes, whether it's firearm protection or, tactical training, or training with edge weapons, or kind of things that I do with the empty hand and training against multiple attackers, and a lot of what I just said. But I think a lot of people naively look at self-defense as sort of a hobby, that it's a recreational thing, that they go through phases where they'll practice a lot and train a lot, and then they'll go through a period of time where it sort of falls off their radar. Some people never take self-defense. They're not fighters, and they're not prone to violence and try to stay away from violence. So they assume that they'll be fine. However, we live in a very violent society, and I don't mean to sound pessimistic, just being realistic. The average person has typically 1 to 3 violent encounters in their lifetime. Some people, it's a lot more, right? Depending upon whether you're a man or a woman, and where you work and where you live, and just how your lifestyle is, will dictate potentially whether that probability goes much, much higher than that. But your whole life could change literally in about 10 seconds or less. So considering that the average response from the police, depending upon where you live, but on average is maybe 15 to 20 minutes, you're on your own. A lot can happen in 10 seconds. So 15 to 20 minutes, with you and your family potentially being harmed, that could seem like an eternity. And the repercussions of that, the trauma, can echo for the remainder of your life. So I think self-defense is a critical foundation for urban freedom.
Definitely. And if you live in a major city right now, and some of them like LA, they might not even respond at all. I mean, the
Yeah.
response time is, we have a friend that owns several restaurants in LA, and they got broken into, and the police didn't even show up till 24 hours later, and they said, sorry, you should have your own private security. I mean,
Right.
they literally didn't do anything about it, and there were thousands of dollars stolen out of these restaurants. And so he goes and hires a private security group that has watch, and so that's a huge thing. Now,
that's a really great point. A lot of people also too falsely assume that a police officer's job is there to protect you. So you call 911 because something's happening, you're being threatened. Their job isn't to protect you. Their job is to enforce laws. So that's foundation number one. The other thing to keep in mind is where we live, especially speaking of Los Angeles, we live in a very arid environment. So there's a lack of water, and there's also a lot of cultural diversity. And we have roughly, give or take, 10,000 police officers patrolling a population of 10 million or so people. There's a lot that can go awry, just probability-wise. At some period of time, there'll be some kind of earthquake or natural disaster. Hopefully there's no artificial man-made, terrorist event or whatnot, but it's just a matter of time before another event happens like that, whether it's a big earthquake or we have another 9/11 type event or something along those lines. You had the Rodney King riots years ago before I moved here from Boston, and I knew there were a lot of shopkeepers in Koreatown area that they had to protect their businesses from being burned down with firearms because the police weren't there to protect them. So it's important that people realize the onus is on them to protect themselves and their family. And you're very fortunate if, police or some other people can help arrive in a timely fashion to help save you, so to speak. But you're really on your own for the most part.
definitely. So for someone that is new to defending themselves and martial arts, just in general, what would the first recommendation you would have for them be?
Well, I'd say the first thing, depending upon where they live, is finding a martial arts style that sort of fits their personality type. So, and also body type. Whether you're male or female, it doesn't really make a difference. But if it's not something that you feel like is an extension of you and doesn't blend with you well, it probably won't be a good compatible fit. For instance, if you're like an ex-football player, a big kind of burly, strong guy, and you like physical contact and you're very aggressive personality and you like confronting things head on, you might prefer doing a martial arts style that also too, like Muay Thai or something like that, that's also very direct and hard, just fits your personality. If you're someone who doesn't so much like conflict or you don't really like injuries on your body, or I imagine a lot of people in your forum probably focusing more like on longevity. Like for myself, I don't want something that, would make me feel capable of defending myself maybe in my 20s, but as I get into my 30s or 40s, 50s or 60s, it ages my body and prematurely ages my body and injures my body. And so I'm less capable of defending myself. That doesn't really fly with me. I want something functional that works regardless of athleticism. So whether I'm sick, injured, old, whatever, limitations I think I might have, I'm not in shape, I'm overweight, I have asthma, I'm just sort of making things up. I would want something that if my life depends on it and my family's life depends on the success of me being able to defend myself and them, I don't want athleticism being a factor. So the way that I was trained, the martial art that I teach, combat Japanese jiu-jitsu, specifically Ketsugo jiu-jitsu, it focuses on sensitivity to energy and sensitivity to your surroundings, with a lot of science and a lot of understanding of anatomy and physiology, so that if you're outnumbered, it's 10-1 or 8-1 or 6-1, or you get attacked in an awkward environment where you can't really use your physicality. You're seated in your car, you're on a stairwell, you're on crutches, you're in a wheelchair, something's compromising you. You want to have a solution. But that would be my first sort of recommendation, is finding a martial art that sort of fits your body type. If you're someone where longevity is a concern, or you do have some kind of compromise component, you might want to consider one of the more sort of softer martial arts that's doesn't rely so much on just athleticism. If you're young and you're kind of sort of aggressive and whatnot, and maybe larger bodied, you might prefer one of the harder styles. But even for that person, as they age and or they get injured, they will be forced to adapt.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you bring that up. I mean, I remember I had a basketball injury, and I tore my ACL years ago. And I think 6 weeks post-op, I had enough courage. I went to a Charger game, an NFL game, and they played the Raiders in San Diego. So I'm a Southern California native and grew up in LA, and then moved to San Diego for a decade, working at a Scripps clinic in La Jolla. And so I actually, became a big Charger fan at that time. But I showed up at the game, and then everyone knows the Raider fans are notorious for being relentless. This guy tries to pick a fight with me. I'm in crutches and a leg brace, and he tries to pick a fight with me when I'm like walking out of the bathroom for no reason. And it was just, all these things. I mean, obviously, I diffused it because I was in no way, shape, or form able to do anything, and nor would I wanted to compromise it at that stage. But there's times where people get in those situations. So that's
I mean, you think of sort of in the not too. I think people still do that, but as of the last few years, the knockout game that young kids will play on people, and they'll just randomly select man, woman, elderly. They don't care. They'll just randomly select someone that they'll super dangerous, knock someone out cold, and person might fall and hit their head on a curb or concrete. People have died from that, but yeah, you just never know. Just because you may be a pacifist, or you're not prone to violence, and you always feel like you can talk your way out of things. Today might be the day where you're at the wrong place at the wrong time, and somebody, whether they're strung out on drugs or they're just having some kind of anger tantrum of sorts, they're going to take it out on you, and they're not in an emotional state of mind that they can rationally think. So all of your words that you're trying to use to rationally, talk them down from being aggressive doesn't mean anything. They just want to cause you bodily harm. And they could be sort of, sociopathic tendencies, and or compromise with their mind, like I said, on drugs, that they want to do more than just sort of give you a black eye, bumps and bruises. So it's important to be prepared. It's just like, I look at it sort of like insurance, right? People don't have insurance because they're paranoid. It's imprudent, right? You own a home. It's prudent to have fire insurance. I presume everyone on the call most of us probably drive a car. It's prudent to wear a seatbelt. You're not expecting to get into a car accident, but if something happens, right? Even it doesn't matter how good a driver you are. If something happens, or even with eventually, automated cars, things can go awry with the software. It's prudent to wear a seatbelt. It's prudent to have insurance. When you live in a society with other human beings and even animals, right? We presume that it's going to be a person attacking us. What if a dog attacks you or your family or your kids? Do you have any understanding of how you would defend against that as well? So I look at it like insurance, right? It's sort of a worst case scenario, but the probability is sometime in your lifetime, we will get into a car accident of sorts. And most of us will have some kind of violent encounter of sorts. And women run the additional risk of, sexual predators and things of that nature.
Yeah, and I mean, for us, this is all about awareness and tapping into this at a deeper level. And when you're connected above, which I know both of us are, you're going to be not have to deal with these challenges more often than not. And so these are more scenarios that are so rare, like a shark attack per se. And it's all, for me, it's more about not bringing it into your space. Like, we're not looking for conflict. It's more, again, it's all prevention and preparation. So when you do this training as well, you develop more coordination. It's a crossover into all the other sports you do, because you do become ambidextrous. You do learn how to use your hands and your feet together at the same time. And you do learn how to, so my whole career, I've worked on gaining people's balance, helping facilitate them have superior balance. And now I'm working on unbalancing them through spiraling and then keep moving into their space. And so there's different systems out there. When I first started, I'll share my story. I did a lot of Taekwondo and kickboxing growing up since I was 12 on up. And that's it's a keeping a distance. I equate it to like basically tennis would be more of a one-dimensional athlete. They're not jumping. They're just really moving forward and backwards and laterally really well. Whereas those modalities, they want to keep space between you and strike, and then get back and have space. And in this one, it's a whole different deal. You're literally connecting with their energy and then just exposing them and breaking lots of bones all at the same time. So there's
if you have to.
What's that?
If you have to.
Well, yeah, but there's not a fight anymore when you do that. So your pillars for Ketsugo are what?
Great question. And just kind of harkening back on just a few of the points you brought up before we answer that, and you mentioned it in your introduction. Part of the reason why I think it's so important that people are capable of defending themselves is that changes every single part of your person, from your mental body, your physical body, your spiritual body, your metaphysical body. Your body starts to vibrate. Your aura changes. You vibrate on a different frequency. So criminals, just like we look at lions, for instance, in Africa, and they want to pick the weak link that they're going to basically go after and catch as their prey. And their life depends on it, because if they waste a lot of energy trying to catch a gazelle that it's not able to catch, it would eventually run out of energy and die. So it scans, it looks for body language and energy vibrations to look for the weak gazelle, which is easy prey. Well, that isn't just something that happens in the animal kingdom. It also happens with human beings, right? 80% of our first impression when you meet someone is just from body language, unspoken, nonverbal communication. So criminals profile criminals. Criminals profile population when they walk by. They're looking at the person that has victim energy. They're kind of shuffling the feet when they walk and slouch shoulders, and they just sort of look sort of down. Maybe they are fearful of making eye contact with people. They might be sort of glued to their iPhone and they're not paying attention to the surroundings, oblivious for the most part, or seemingly oblivious. Those people are putting out an aura or a vibration of being a victim. They're calling that energy subconsciously into their life. And those criminals are feeding off that. It's like a kind of sonar, radar picking that up. So we want to reverse that polarity, where we're not projecting the polarity of being a victim, where we're strong, we're confident, but it's not fake. You don't have to speak it. I can tell also through reading body language, not so much like the criminal looking for the victim, but I can tell who's a trained martial artist or who's military, who's a SEAL, without someone telling me. I can just tell by the aura, the way they walk, not even necessarily before they speak. You can just see it. You can feel that vibration. So in terms of your question, the pillars, the three pillars of the jiu-jitsu that I teach, and it's not Brazilian jiu-jitsu. It's not a sport derivative. It's Japanese combat jiu-jitsu, battlefield jiu-jitsu, that was used on the battlefield for killing and crippling. And then once you learn how to do that and your sensitivity improves, you can learn how to control someone without necessarily having to use that level of force. But the three pillars are evading, unbalancing, and creating and causing trauma. That last part, creating and causing trauma, basically you want to have at your discretion the ability to use the appropriate level of force needed to defend yourself. So if we only taught crippling and killing, but you're a civilian, non-military, and everybody you touch, if you get into an altercation, you cripple or kill, you're gonna have a lot of lawsuits on your hands. Not to mention spiritually, right? It's not appropriate to use that level of force on someone. And I also look at it. We have a great responsibility as a martial artist that you don't want to use excessive force. It'd almost be like an adult hitting a child. That's not appropriate, right? There's nothing honorable in adults being as big as he is, physically assaulting or harming someone smaller than that. So you want to have across that spectrum. What I like about this martial art is the versatility with that last part, creating and causing trauma. It teaches me how to gently subdue a threat and basically nullify a threat without having to hurt someone. If things get more serious or the assailant won't stop, you have the ability to utilize pressure points or pain compliance where it hurts a lot while the technique is being applied. But once you relinquish that technique, there's no bruising, there's no harm to the body. You learn how to strike, whether it's for knockouts or then you get into striking to crushing bones, to joint locks, to dislocating bones, to crippling, paralyzing, snapping someone's spine, or if you had to, snapping someone's neck. You need everything across the spectrum. If you were to learn a martial art, but we never taught any lethal techniques, but you got into a situation with your family where your lives were in grave danger and you never learned that, boy, did I fail you and I was negligent as a teacher. And I'd also say you also want to learn those lethal techniques so that you don't accidentally kill someone haphazardly. Oh, you didn't realize if I touched someone here, or I didn't realize if I grabbed someone's head that I could break their neck, or if I touch someone like this, their spine could snap. That's dangerous too. So you want everything across the spectrum so you can basically go about society and protect your space and defend yourself if needed, but you don't want to become a monster, right? You want to have that versatility. The unbalancing, that second pillar is really, really, really important. I notice when I watch a lot of different martial arts, they don't really focus on that. And the one sort of caveat I'll say is no one martial art is better than another. I think all martial arts back in the day when they were used on the battlefield, not for philosophizing what martial arts better than another in YouTube forums, where people sort of go back and forth commenting about this and that is better. No, literally, you live and die and you walk away from the confrontation. We stress unbalancing. And unbalancing is really, really important because on the street, there are no weight classes. On the street, there's no rules. And the UFC and whatnot, it's marketed as no holds barred, but there's typically 29 to 31 rules or so that you're allowed to or not allowed to do that completely changes the dynamics of everything. It's not a real fight. And that's not to say, UFC fighters aren't tough. They're very tough. I mean, they're already big athletic individuals. So with or without training, they're going to be tough guys, right? And then they're great athletes. So that together is going to allow them to be really tough. And then on top of that, they have martial art training. So they're tough to begin with. However, there's a huge difference between a street fight and a sanctioned bout inside a ring. And so when you have weight classes and there's a ref and there's things I don't have to worry about as soon as the bell rings, the match starts. That when you go to kind of start throwing jabs at me to sort of feel range, I don't have to worry about a straight edge razor cutting my carotid artery, right? Or you take me down to the ground with a takedown and I'm going to pull you into guard and wrap my legs around you. I'm not thinking about a guy pulling out a dagger and starting to, lacerate my liver or femoral artery. So it's really important with that unbalancing. that we can take away any advantages of athleticism, size, length, reach, aggression. You might be more skilled than me. You might be much older than me, or you might have trained for a longer period of time than I have. However, if I become an expert on balancing, you brought it up earlier, learning how to spiral, basically take advantage of the transverse plane in someone's body and force their body to start to spiral while, say, the feet stay stationary. And/or I become aware of Japanese principles. I don't speak Japanese, but it's pronounced loosely Happo no Kuzushi. It's called the triangle of unbalance. I learned how to read people's feet and see, regardless of someone's size or strength, what's the weakest balance point in their anatomy. And with a finger, you could push them or pull them on that triangle. And Bruce Lee used to take advantage of that when he would do his 1-inch punch demonstration, and he would knock people back. Tremendous amount of power there. However, he would always align himself to make sure that he's taking advantage of people's triangle of balance. So even if there wasn't a lot of power, you could knock someone back very easily. So balance is really important, right? You might be a woman, you might be elderly, you could be an athlete too, but you happen to be injured. You were talking about being on crutches and a guy attacked you. We live in a violent society. So how would you defend yourself if your attacker is bigger, faster, stronger, younger, more skilled? No problem. The kryptonite to physicality is balance. And you spend your whole career helping athletes become more balanced, which is really important. We want to be balanced as martial artists, but we also want to become experts and masters of robbing people of their balance so that fights can end really quickly. I'm not looking for a long exchange and there's multiple rounds and I go back to my corner and my coach, tells me to make some adjustments and circle this way or, some patterns and whatnot because he sees some tendencies that you're doing. I can't do that. It's got to end. If it doesn't end in probably 2 seconds or so, I'm probably not going to make it. And the reason why I say 2 seconds is I'm training not for one attacker. I'm presuming there's always going to be multiple attackers. This is in the street. So a lot of people aren't in the street by themselves, right? They're there with a significant other. They're there with friends. Could be innocent bystanders jump in, not knowing who the victim was or whatnot, but they jump in and things get messy. Could be a bouncer at a club. It's so many things can happen so quickly. It's really important that you end things kind of at the snap of your fingers. And the only way to really do that is by taking balance. So that's pillar number 2. Pillar number 1 is evading. The reason why we focus so much on evading is, again, this is coming from battlefield combat jiu-jitsu, where the primary weapon that they were defending against was a katana, 3 to 4 foot razor blade that whistles through the air. It's moving so quickly, and they're so sharp. A good katana could chop off 3 heads in one stroke.
Wow.
A really good katana could chop off 4 heads in one stroke. A really good katana could almost chop a man in half vertically or horizontally. It's pretty serious stuff. It's not something where you'll see a strategy in, say, sometimes MMA, where they'll take abuse. They'll take some shots coming in, grapplers, to then take someone down to the ground. However, if those shots you're taking, is a katana or a blade, you're bleeding out. You're not taking those shots. So we highly, highly stress evasion because I presume the person I'm defending myself on the street, 1, there's many of them, and 2, I'm going to presume that they're armed, whether it's firearms, whether it's blades, whether it's makeshift weapons. I'm just going to presume they have weapons. So I can't get into a back and forth exchange with them. So instead of basically attacking them head on, I'm usually taking advantage of a lot of sort of sophisticated footwork that will give me good entries of attack and also entries of evasion so that I'm not getting cut up. So evade, unbalance, create would be our 3 main pillars.
And on combatscience.com, that's your website, right?
Correct.
And you have a membership program where you have a catalog of videos where someone could just pay and go in and learn it, right?
Yeah, exactly right. It's over 100 hours of video from myself. There's also video from the instructor that I learned from, and some of the other advanced members of this particular system. You can go at your own pace. You want to follow linearly from video one to the last video. It's up to you. Or some people like to jump around. It's cataloged under evade videos and unbalancing videos and creating and causing trauma videos. And there's a supplemental section that gets into Q&A and just a lot of different scenarios that I think people would find fast. Helps facilitate their learning, whether they want to, leverage combat science solely to train out of the comforts of their own home, or they want to use that to supplement in-person training or supplement that also to in addition to one-on-one Zooms. It's up to the individual, but combatscience.com is the website.
Awesome. Now, what would you say about your grandmaster, Peter Friedman?
In terms of him as a martial artist, absolute genius, and you'd be lucky to meet a human being and martial artist like him in a lifetime. His skill level is literally off the charts, and his knowledge level, not just of his particular system, but of martial arts in general. His martial arts IQ is literally off the charts. He could see you back in the day when you were doing Taekwondo, and you could show him some of the katas you were doing, and whether or not he trained in Taekwondo or not, he could tell you the holes and what you're missing out of your katas and what you need to add to your katas to make it effective, and what you need to change in your martial art for your particular body type to make it effective for you. So that's the really important, I think, distinguishing factor of the martial art that we do is it fits your unique body type. If you have a prosthetic hip, or you have a bad Achilles, or you're in a wheelchair, you're on crutches, you're tall, you're short, you're overweight, you have asthma, doesn't make a difference. You think you're too old. Martial art adapts to you wherever you're at, and he has that ability to teach you how to do that, and the ability to teach you how to become fluent in the martial arts. A lot of people will learn martial arts by memorizing techniques. Technique being a prearranged response. Someone grabs you with the right hand, do step A through F and whatnot. And the problem with that is it rarely works because life is full of snafus. If I grab you with my left hand, but you're only trained against the right, or I grab you, but you're now sitting down, or you're against a wall, or so many dynamics, it's not going to work. But if we were to teach you martial arts like you would have learned English, instead of memorizing 1,000 phrases in English, and if you misspeak, phrase 1,001 someone asks you because you never learned that, the consequences socially is, you get embarrassed. Well, martial arts could cost you your life or your family's life. So what do? Well, we sit you down and we teach you, and this is how he taught me. He invented a system of teaching you where he teaches you principles and concepts that unlocks the mystery of the martial arts. So it would be equivalent to, instead of memorizing 1,000 phrases in English, what if we sat down and we taught you grammar, and we taught you how to conjugate verbs, and we teach you vocabulary, and you learn syntax, and you learn colloquial slang, and then you start to learn how to create your own sentences, because you try to mimic the way I speak or the way I walk or the way I think, that's not going to be your highest self or very effective for you. But if you learn to be yourself and you learn to be fluent, you don't need to memorize 1,000 phrases. You don't need to memorize anything. And there's nothing to memorize, there's nothing to forget. So if you haven't been training for years and all of a sudden something happens to you, this stuff will still come out because you didn't memorize anything. You weren't faking. There was nothing to remember and nothing to forget. It will come out of you, and you don't have to suddenly go into martial art mode. It's an extension of you 24/7. So he taught me, when I first met him, I was 18 years old. I was a freshman in college, Boston University. And he was teaching in an underground school in Boston. And he told me when I got my first belt with him, which would be a yellow belt, it'd be equivalent to a 5th degree black belt elsewhere. And I'm thinking, I didn't say this to him, but I'm thinking that's the stupidest hyperbole I think I've ever heard in my life. Like, what's this guy talking about? But I liked him, and I liked what he was teaching, and I liked the martial arts, so it just sort of blew it off. And about 3 months into training, this jiu-jitsu master from Ireland came over to our school. I was really excited to meet him. I had never trained elsewhere, and I just heard a lot of great things about him, so I was excited to meet him. And we had a class of about 18 people, small dojo, and I paired up with him beginning of class, so I was really excited to train with him. And about a minute into training, I was really perplexed because like physically, I was about on the same level as this guy. I've been training 3 months, and mentally, I blew him out of the water. And I wasn't a prodigy. I was just a typical student of Sensei Friedman's teaching modality, but I didn't understand what was going on. And in the meantime, my teacher, Peter, is sitting in a waiting room probably 6 feet away, watching and hearing this whole interaction, and afraid I'm going to say something to this guy to offend him. And I wouldn't, but I'm just trying to figure out what's happening. So I asked him politely, how long have you been training in jiu-jitsu? He's like, 25 years. I think 25 years. And then I think to myself, I think I've been doing this 3 months. It's at least 2 months. I think it's 3 months. I didn't say it to him, but I'm like, what? So then I go, well, what belt are you? And he said in his Irish accent, 5th degree black belt. And I'm thinking, like, I don't understand what's happening. He goes, but if I was in your school, I wouldn't even have my white belt. I go, what are you talking about? He goes, your school's really advanced. I go, what? And then my teacher didn't want the conversation proceeding, so he yells out, Mate, rotate. So I go down to the end of the class to pick up a new training partner. He goes over to my instructor, and he goes, so what level black belt's that guy? And Peter goes, who? He's like, that guy. He's like, what guy? It's like that guy over there. He points. He goes, you mean Dave? He goes, Dave doesn't have a belt yet. He just started in my school a few months ago. And that was kind of one of my first revelations that I was training with a really gifted instructor. And back to your question earlier, too, in terms of people sort of deciding what's one of the most important things it's not just the martial art that fits them. It's finding a really good teacher. So you could find someone who teaches like Peter. You'd be very hard-pressed to find that. But if you did, and they happen to teach Kung Fu, or they happen to teach Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, or they happen to teach Aikido or Taekwondo, it's not the art. It's the teacher and the teacher's level of sort of martial science and that martial IQ. And that the ability to instill that to you. Because it makes no difference, right? If Pete's a really tough fighter, and he is. I mean, he grew up in a rough neighborhood and unfortunately had to basically fight his way out for survival. None of his friends made it out of the neighborhood. They all died from getting shot or stabbed. He made it out through his martial arts system. It's one thing, though, right, if the teacher can fight. And then it's another thing if the teacher can actually teach well to get you to understand those advanced concepts so that you can replicate it. And then it's also another thing, does that teacher teach with empathy and compassion? Because a lot of teachers will teach, but your body's going to get wrecked. You're going to get injured. Your neck's going to get, jacked up. You're going to get disc injuries. You're going to tweak your knee. The list goes on. So I was really fortunate to find a teacher like Peter. One, an amazing fighter I'd be hard-pressed to find people with his combat experience. Two, an amazing instructor and teacher. I've never met a better teacher than him. And then also, too, human being, we're very compassionate and a lot of empathy, where he's teaching us how to preserve our body for longevity and how to preserve our body so we maximize sensitivity, that if we go against someone who's, multiple times stronger or bigger than us, or there's weapons that we have the sensitivity to figure our way out of that situation without causing harm to our body. So he's amazing. There's a really great interview with him on YouTube. I think it's under GM for Grandmaster Peter Friedman. If people want to look it up, it's also on the homepage of combatscience.com. But he gets into his kind of life story and things he overcame and why he developed the system the way that he did. And it's a fascinating interview. I think a lot of people don't really have a good understanding difference between sport and combat. People equate one with the other. They equate, UFC and whatnot with combat. It's very, very different. And no disrespect to UFC fighters. They're tough guys. I don't know if I could do what they do. I mean, even just their, cardiovascular conditioning and our athletic conditioning, and it's a different skill set. But the Steven Seagal made a comment that, swimming in a pool and swimming in an ocean are two different things. That's kind of hits the nail on the head between combat and sport, right? Combat is, your opponent going in, you've studied tape on them, and he's wearing gloves, and there's rules, and there's a ref, and it's a flat surface. Combat is typically it's just littered with snafus. You're probably going to get attacked at night, so you can't see well. Probably going to get jumped from behind when you're not expecting it. You're probably going to get jumped, like I said, with those lions kind of looking for those gazelles. The worst possible time. You got a migraine headache. You got a fever of 103. You might have vertigo going on, or you might have an eye patch on. You're on crutches, like you were speaking about earlier. You're on uneven surface. Could be stairwell, or could be a curb, or some kind of gradient. It's raining, so you can't really kick on one leg. It's wet. Could be cold outside. Could be wintertime in Boston or somewhere else. Just a multitude of stuff. That's why you're getting jumped then, because like those lions scanning for the weak gazelles, you're vulnerable. Are you prepared? And so now you presume it's just one-on-one, because that might be how you train for all the ring fighting you've done or dojo sparring you've done. That first person is a decoy. That first person is a decoy. Though a lot of times in nature they'll call it sort of sacrificing the one. A female wolf might come out and she's she's menstruating and leaving a scent, and so a dog follows her off into the woods, and then literally the dog gets surrounded by like 9 or 12 different coyotes or wolves, and they start picking them apart. That's street versus a combat versus sport. Anything goes. There's no such thing as a fair fight. There's no such thing as a sucker, just a sucker who gets punched. So you want to have a very high vibration, very high level of awareness, very keen and astute peripheral vision, where you can see your environment really, really well, and you're able to handle whatever comes your way. You were speaking earlier, the martial art you did before, you needed space to make it effective. Well, what happens when you don't have space? What happens if you get attacked in a car, or you get jumped by 3 or 4 people and space is taken away? You want to be fluent, as I was saying earlier, like learning to speak English. You're fluent. You're not proficient, you're fluent. So regardless of what life throws your way, you have an answer. And there's no memorized techniques. So you're able to speak extemporaneously on the fly. I'm able to, and as you learn this system, you're able to invent techniques extemporaneously on the fly. And it might be someone attacks you in a way you've never seen before, or a weapon you've never seen before, and you invent a technique that you've never even done or conceived of before. But you can bet your life it's going to work, because you're fluent in martial science to the same level that you're fluent in English. And what you say is going to come out, and it's going to be articulate, and it's going to be grammatically correct, and it's going to work. The most important thing is it's going to work. You don't get a second chance. You can have rematches and whatnot in UFC in the ring. There aren't any second chances on the street. One punch or one stab or one slash could end your life or permanently change your life. So that's my 2 cents.
Well, I have to say, personally, I've got a chance to work with you and Peter Freeman, and you guys are both some of the most incredible teachers anyone could ever have, and that I've ever had. So thank you for all you do. I know you're a super busy guy, and I've kept you longer than I was supposed to. So thank you for your time.
Yeah.
And we look forward to hearing more from you guys. Check out combatscience.com. Jump on his membership program. Super simple. You can reach out directly to him there. And you are absolutely amazing human. So thank you, Sensei David, for everything.
Thanks again.